I had a question recently which really made me think deeply because there was no clear answer and there was no clear-cut way out of this one. All I know is that's a hell of a challenge, and I want to say that up front. So the question is, how do I, get good in my recovery? How do I not engage in my eating disorder when I'm living with somebody? In this case, it was a spouse, or it is a spouse, who also has an eating disorder. And in the question, it was, she has bulimia and he's struggling with anorexia, and both of them are on this journey, trying to get out of it. That's a tricky one. And I thought a lot about it. And then I realized that actually the answer to the question was going to resonate with all sorts of people for all sorts of reasons. Because whether you have someone close to you, whether it's a spouse or a sibling or a parent or a child or a best friend who's also struggling with an incredibly difficult disorder or addiction, it's going to be a challenge, particularly when you're already going through the muck of recovery. Now having somebody very close to you going through something similar, if not identical, what do we do then? The first thing first is, when it's the same addiction or the same disorder, in a way that's like, whew, great, you're kind of on the same path. And if both of you are feeling ready to tackle it, then in a way you can be working together. There, of course, will be some problems that arise if one person's doing better than the other. And I think this would take a lot of compassionate work with both people at the same time to keep making progress together. And that would be true of whether you were just personal training and one person was doing hell of a well and somebody else wasn't. As a coach in that predicament, it's not easy to juggle this, but there is a way as a coach, from a coaching perspective, to keep both or all the members of that little group on board and engaged and supporting each other, and really being present with each other during the days that they're winning, and really being supportive of each other on the days when they're struggling. Because the reality about recovery, whether it's from an addiction or a disorder, is that it's going to be messy. It's a guaranteed chaos. And everybody's going to have hard days, which doesn't mean everybody has to relapse or fall off the horse, but everybody's going to have huge days of struggle. And oftentimes, on the day when you're winning, the person that you're in recovery with is really struggling, and you can be there for them, and the roles will reverse. So the trick in that instance is that you've got to get your ego out the way if you're having struggle and they seem to be cruising. You are both committed to recovery, or whatever it might be. And when you're both working together on something extremely challenging, it's imperative that you let go of the ego, and this is not easy to do, and keep saying, no matter what it takes, I'm going to do the work. If I take 5 times as long to get there as that person that I love, it doesn't matter. I'm still doing the work. If they take 5 times longer than me, it doesn't matter. I'm still doing the work, and I'm going to love and support them no matter what. And that is the relationship you have to form as a little team if you're working on something together. So in a way, it can be very helpful to be struggling with the same thing, because there'll be a lot of crossover in the kind of things you want to do to help yourself make progress. And specifically, if it was 2 people working on recovering from bulimia, which is what I specialize in, well, then great. As the coach, we've got some work to do about helping make sure that nobody's getting to the point of, I'm not good enough, I'm not moving fast enough. That can be overcome because at least both people are implementing the same procedures, the same routines. They're beginning to listen to their tummy and spot when they're full and get through binge urges together. And they can have a combined binge busting account, and they can celebrate together and lean on each other. And then they need to help each other through the hard days. Very challenging, but in a way, it could be hugely beneficial. Now, what is the case when one person has bulimia and the other person has anorexia? A totally different situation. Or another person in your life is hugely restrictive, if not an actual anorexic. Or what if you're dealing with somebody who's got who is an alcoholic, and you're trying to not drink because it's so much harder to recover when you're drinking? And the examples are endless. So ultimately, we're saying is, you've got your very challenging work cut out for you, and they've got an equally challenging but not the same journey of recovery and work to do. assuming that in this instance, both people are wanting to improve, are wanting to change. It feels like there'd be a whole nother video for what happens when you've got somebody in your life who doesn't want to change. And poof, definitely another video for that. But in this instance, let's talk about two people who really want to recover, who are wanting freedom from whatever's holding them back. What do you do when that person has a different challenge to you? And make no mistake, the work you do with anorexia recovery is different to what you do with bulimia. And I know that's not normal. And I know that a lot of people just put it all under the big old umbrella of eating disorder recovery. But I'm a firm believer that the way you work with anorexia is very different to the way you work with bulimia. I'm happy to go into that. If anybody's interested, I can make another video on it. But make no mistake, there will be separate challenges. And this is what I think is most important here. Actually, two things. One, you need to prioritize you. No matter what's going on for the other person and how much they're suffering, your journey is your journey and it comes first. And that's very hard to say, because I know how much when you love somebody, you want desperately to put your needs to one side and be there for them. However, I'm going to implore that your recovery comes first, because you will be so much better equipped to be there for them when you are in a good, healthy, happy space. So your recovery comes first. Whatever you and your coach or you and your counselor or your therapist are working on to make it happen, that is your priority. And often I find that the practices you need to do, if you've got homework assignments, whatever, do them at the beginning of the day. Find a quiet moment before anybody else is awake to do your work. So that's already setting you up for some level of success. There will be a number of other challenges on this, and I don't even know where to begin or end talking about them. But whatever the journey is and the homework assignments that you're getting, or the whatever you're doing, make sure that is your top priority. And the best way to do that is to do it first in the day, and to be ensuring that you're doing your work first and their needs are met second. And that's going to sound selfish. And I guess by definition it is, but in a way, it's the best thing you can do, and therefore selfless, because in order to help them, you need to recover. Which doesn't mean that you spend your whole day just doing whatever you want and ignoring their needs. When you are strong, you can be there for them. But when you are just day in, day out doing your work, you've got to put yourself first. So number one, prioritize yourself. And number two, always come back to love. I'm such a mushy romantic on this, but I truly believe that recovery is nothing more or less, it sounds so easy, than reconnecting with the truth of who we are. And my firm belief is that anybody in recovery from any addiction or disorder, and to my mind, they're very much the same thing, is somebody who was born with a loving heart and wants nothing more than to give love and to receive love. And I think addiction is the very indicator of just how loving and how lovable those people are. It's this horrible irony that something that's come from love can turn into such pain and agony. But if we didn't have pain and agony, it would be an indicator that we didn't have love either. So in a way, it's this weird juxtaposition of pain being an indicator of how much we're loving. You know, I always say grief is by far and away the biggest evidence that we have that we've loved. And as awful as that feels, it shows how capable we are of loving even when it's painful, right? Because if you didn't love, you wouldn't be in grief. And addiction and eating disorders are to my mind, the biggest evidence that we are desperate for love, and we want nothing more than to just love, 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 love. And in order to do that, we end up doing these crazy things to get it. And eating disorder in particular, and bulimia absolutely falls into this category. The methods, the things we resort to in order to get love and connection, to feel significant, meaningful, valued in the world, and to try and give it. A lot of people are perfectionists and people pleasers, and in order to be perfect, we have to keep ourselves in a certain body, and so the eating disorder often manifests as a way of trying to hold on to love or hold on to significance and value. And that may not be everybody's journey, but it's certainly the predominant theme that I see all the time. So, as awful as it is, an eating disorder is a primary indicator that somebody just wants to be loved and will do anything to get it. And it's awful, but it's beautiful. So reconnecting with love means reminding yourself that you are lovable and that you are born to love and that you are wonderful just as you are. And that takes a huge amount of practice when you feel so disconnected from that. You know, the recovery is the recovery of that. I am enough. I am born to love and I am worthy of love. And those will not feel true for a very long time. But that is what you are recovering, is your essence. And it's beautiful. And when you're ready and the disorder starts to break, the chains start to break, you'll reconnect with that and you'll move powerfully into the world with a force of love like nothing before. So that's what's out there for you, and reconnecting with that and just reminding yourself in the deepest, darkest, most awful hours is that you are here to be loved and to love in return. And that is your journey and you're on your way back to that. It's powerful. So it gives us a lot of, sorry, I'm like yaddering here and it's getting very, getting very cheesy, I know. But reminding ourselves of that, like my disorder is signifying just how much I want that and I'm deserving of it and blah, 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 is helpful. And when it comes to being in relationship with somebody, reconnecting with your love for them, which is very different to subverting all your needs, subverting your recovery to give them theirs and to help them on their journey. It's about loving them in their pain, loving them in their anger, loving them in the horror of their addiction and their disorder, and being there for them unconditionally, even when they are not unconditionally loving themselves. Without condition. Without condition doesn't mean they're not pissing you off and driving you mad and doing things that are frustrating you and making things difficult, but it does mean that you are holding firm, that your journey is to love yourself without condition, and you are going to love them without condition too. And loving somebody without condition may mean that sometimes you still have to walk away and take a breather and not be there for them in their hour of need. But love is so much more than just being trampled over and walked on. And, you know, it's about saying, I love you. I'm struggling with you right now, or I'm struggling because you're restricting and I really want to restrict and I'm going to have to step away and I'm going to have to get out of here and I'm going to have to prioritize me right now, but know that I love you. Know that I love you. When I'm strong, I'm here. You know, I'm doing my best. You know, I get all of this is a fine line, but that's why I said this was a difficult conversation and a difficult topic, because there's no doubt that recovery is easier when the ones who are closest to you just are loving and supportive and not in a place of dramatic struggle. Of course, it's an easier place to recover from. However, when you're in a relationship with somebody who's also struggling, just reminding yourself that you love them even when it's hard, and that you love yourself even when it's hard. Remember, we can't only give love to other people, we need to give it to ourselves first, you know. And in fact, if you want to love other people unconditionally, start with you. You know, that's the big theme here, right? Even in all the disorder and the disarray and the chaos and the bad days, love you. Love you then, and love yourself as well when you're having a great day, when you're smashing your recovery. So prioritize yourself, come back to love for them, love for you, unconditional. Doesn't mean you have to be around, but it means you can still love them no matter what. And then the other thing I think is really important is when you're with somebody who's close to you, who's got their own journey, even if it's just somebody who's being super hyper restrictive, always talking about diets and weight loss and always being super judgmental and critical. And if somebody like that's in your life, this is going to be even more important. Prioritize yourself, come back to love. I love them no matter what they're saying. I love them. I don't need to be with them, but I'm loving them right now. And then the third piece is finding your tribe, your community, your team of people who have been through the same thing, are going through the same thing, can support you in a way that really makes sense and is actually useful. You know, I've got the group, the Bulimia Freedom Fighters. I've got other groups as well, where people connect and they support and they cheer each other on, and then they're in each other's bad days. And having people who get you is so powerful and so useful. And again, it doesn't really matter if we're talking about eating disorders, or we're talking about addiction, or we're talking about starting a business or being a mum. If everybody's got very specific struggles. And so whether you're working with a coach who specializes in that, or whether you've just got a great community of people who are like, I've been there, I get you, hey, I can give you some great advice on that is specific to what you're struggling with. Oh, that's where the magic happens, is having that support team. I don't think recovery doesn't happen in a vacuum. Even the people who will say, I did this on my own, actually they've read books, they've had great teachers, they've had great gurus, they've watched, whatever, and they've just had this unbelievable ability to put that into practice without necessarily having a therapist or having a coach or having that takes a high level of discipline, but it happens. But realistically, nobody really does it alone. We do it with the support, love, advice, knowledge, and help of other people. And then through also like daily implementation and practice. So regardless of how disciplined you are, having a mentor, having a teacher, having something to get behind, and even better still, if you can reach out and connect with those people and ask when you're not sure, and cry when you need to cry, and get support where you need it, and have accountability where you need it, to remind you that you are enough, and that to help you get laser focused on what you need to do, particularly when that your person in your life's having a meltdown or a struggle. You need to be laser focused on what your work is today, because that is your priority. And that community, or that mentor, coach, therapist, whatever it is, don't ever let that go, because when the person in your life struggling, you need to have somewhere to go to offload. Because if you can't go to them, then having somebody else to express what's coming up for you is really important. So prioritizing you, reconnecting with unconditional love, both for you and the person you love, having a community who's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, or a coach or a mentor, something to help you move through the bad days, is wonderful. And there was something else that just came up to me, I've forgotten. Oh, well, if I think about it, I'll put it in later. But I think those three things are the best that you can ask for. And then lastly, I would just say, just remember that it's much more challenging to do this when you're in close relationship with somebody who's also in a deep place of struggle. And recovery is messy and it's chaotic, and there's days of intense struggle for everyone. And so compassion. Your journey is tougher than most, and it really is. And it might take a bit longer, and it might mean you need more resilience, and it might mean you need to double down on the self-love, and you might need to double down on the assistance you get on the journey. But mostly it's about compassion. This recovery ain't easy. I wish it was. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a hell of a ride. And everybody will have their own experience. And if you have somebody close to you who's struggling, then it probably means that your journey is going to have a little more challenge on the road. So the next question is, and I love this question. When I first heard this, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good go-to. When we're in times of extreme challenge and struggle, because they're out there for you, there's always better quality problems on the other side of recovery. In recovery, out of recovery, whatever challenges come up for you, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to you? So if you've got somebody in your life who's struggling, whether it's also with this bulimia or whether it's with another addiction or eating disorder, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to you? And ideally, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to both of you? And if you can put your head together and answer that question, or if you can just answer it on your own, it changes the fear and the struggle on the days, even when it's hard, into excitement and opportunity and challenge. And mentally, at the very least, that's a better place to be coming from. Because the mental game is usually the most important game. And then the action comes next. So if we wake up every day, no matter how hard it is, and we say, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to me? How could I turn this into the best thing that ever happened to me? And I can't answer that question for you because every situation will be different. But just by asking it, you'll begin to come up with good quality answers. I often say the why is interesting, the why is important, but the what now, that's where the magic happens because it's in the action. Once you've learned something, what now? This is awful. I'm struggling. What now? How could this be the best thing that ever happened to me? How will this force me to do something that maybe I wouldn't have done? How is this requiring me to step up and up my game today and do something differently and double down on whatever it is I'm trying, whether it's tummy check-ins or getting through the worst binge urge in the world? How does having them along for this ride, or how does me having my journey and they're having their journey make me want this even more and ready to do whatever it takes? You know, all of those things. Ask yourself, how could this be the best thing that ever happened to you? And begin to brainstorm all the reasons. And then once you got those, you're going to have some what nows. Because once we come up with solutions to challenges, there's always action steps that come next. So for any of you who are watching this video, I hope you found that really useful and exciting, because I have said you have more of a challenge. And so now we're saying, yes, you have more of a challenge, which means you have a greater opportunity. And the road is hard, but it doesn't mean it has to all be awful. And your job is to find why this will be, you'll be able to look back at this and go, as horrible as that was, I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I recognize that can be really hard to do on a hard day. And yet it is a practice that you can take with you for the rest of your life to help you with any challenge you face.